Today, we are going to get down and dirty and talk about the pest of the cool season garden. Now, I'm going to show you how you can prevent these critters from destroying your precious veggies. But I want to tell you, it's probably not the way that you're thinking. It's feeling like fall outside, and this weekend and next week is going to be magic. I'm so excited, and I cannot wait to get out in my backyard and release my inner wild child. I'm going to share my best ways of preventing most cool season pests from making your garden their favorite late night buffet. Trust me, these methods work. I'm Kelly, and I am the flock boss, mama hen, and crazy plant lady of Wild Child Farms. We have a tiny little backyard farm, and we have a garden that we grow out of year round. I think that once you get out and you release your inner wild child, you will heal your soul. Now, I've got good news and bad news for you with the cool season pest. And I'm going to start with the bad news. My mama always started with bad news, and she would say, if I tell you the bad news first and get that out of the way, the good news becomes much more exciting. So let's start today with the bad news. The bad news about cool season pest is that they are voracious eaters. They come into the garden with a huge appetite and nothing but time. This is a recipe for disaster. Cabbage worms, army worms, slugs and snails, midnight munchers like rabbits, raccoons, and deer. They're going to want those tender green vegetables, and they're not really going to show their faces until you are sound asleep. You can literally go to bed one night and wake up the next morning to a garden that is completely gone. Does that get you excited about a fall season garden? Probably not. But here's the good news. The good news is that those are basically the only pests you're going to encounter this season. And they're very, very easy to stay on top of. And that's what I'm going to teach you today. In gardening, we are typically reactive, right? Like we see something and we have to deal with it. With the cool season pest, you guys, I want to show you a different way. I want you to think about being proactive in your backyard garden instead of being reactive. And I think that if you look at it that way, you're going to really be able to do a lot to keep these pests away. You've heard the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. That could not be more true than in the fall garden in South Louisiana. I wrote a blog post at releaseyourinnerwildchild.com, and I shared my favorite ways to keep cool season pests away. These are the methods that I share inside the Wild Child Garden Club. They're the methods I share inside the Kitchen Garden Academy. They're the methods that I share with all the clients that I coach in the cool season, and I want you to know them too, guys, because they work. They will keep these pests away, and they're very simple to implement. Now, notice I said simple. I did not say easy. They're simple to implement. They may require a little bit of work on your part, but isn't it worth it to not have to deal with a destroyed garden overnight? I think so. The first thing, though, that I want you to know about cool season pest, besides the fact that you have to be ahead of the game, is that you got to stay ahead of the game. Daily observations are going to be key. And this is going to be twofold, because being out in your garden, guys, is so good for you. It awakens your senses. It clears your mind. It slows down time. It reduces anxiety, and it builds your immune system. It's just as good for you as your veggies are. So I want you to really be mindful and get out in the garden. You being in the garden is not only good for you, but it's also good for those vegetables. In instances like snails and slugs, they eat super fast, but they're also super small. So if you can catch them before they invite all of their friends to the garden party, the damage will be minimal. You're going to start, and the very first thing you'll see with slugs is tiny little perfect circle holes. They will chew a hole in a leaf that is literally a perfect circle. I want you to know that once you see those, It is time to get busy. In the Wild Child Garden Club, we call it Ladies' Night in the garden, and that's because slugs can't resist beer. They love it, and they will make their way to the beer that you leave out for them, and they will fall right into it. And there is the end of your slug problem. Slug traps work so well, but they have to be put out at the first sign of damage because you've got to get on top of them. If you can kill the first ones that come, they won't be able to bring all their friends, right? Super, super important. So here's how you do it. You're just going to take a small lid, like a mason jar lid. You can use a tuna fish can or a cat food can, and you're going to fill it with beer. Any kind of beer. They are not particular. Take that can and bury it into the soil to make it level. You want them to just slither along and fall into it. That's going to be the end of it. And it is so simple. Now remember, slugs come out at night, so you're going to want to make sure that those slug traps are out before you go to bed at night, and you can pick them up the next morning. You can also use apple cider vinegar. You can use citrus peels. But in the garden club, we have tested just about everything, and we have found that slugs cannot resist beer. So that is our go-to method, and I want to share that with you because I want you to be able to not have slug damage. Once they come, the very first ones are going to do a little bit of damage, but then they're going to bring all their friends back. So you want to make sure you get them at the first sign of damage, and a slug trap is a perfect way to do that. Remember, back to daily observations. You have to be in your garden, guys, in order to see the damage. After a few days, you'll still be able to kill the slugs, but you may not be able to save your plants. Daily observations are key. So take 10 to garden and enjoy it out there. Your garden is so full of life, and it's life-giving as well. 20 minutes in the garden gives you a release of the same exact endorphins as that amount of time would give you in a gym. That's real science. You can Google it. Not to mention the vitamin D you're getting, the fresh air you're breathing, and the way that it clears your mind. Just go into your garden. A lot of people plant and walk away, and they set up timers and irrigation systems, and that is just not the Wild Child way. I want you to be out there with your plants, not just for them, but also for you. Also, I want you to remember, everything is not an emergency. This is so important. One of our garden club members, who actually has our garden of the month this month, reminded us of this in our very first season of the garden club. There were so many new gardeners in the club that just panicked at the first sign of anything. And she reminded us that not everything is an emergency. It might sound a little bit crazy, because I've told you that these pests can destroy your garden in an instant, right? And now I'm telling you, hold up, it's probably not an emergency. What I'm saying is, you cannot completely rid your garden of garden pests. That is never going to happen. It's very unrealistic, and the internet does not do a good job of showing us the realness of garden pests. Your leaves are gonna have holes in them, guys. That's just the way that it is. They're gonna be imperfect, but that's not gonna destroy them. A mouse or a rogue rabbit will find their way in, and no matter how prepared of a gardener you are, you just can't keep everything away. That is okay. We are going to prevent what we can and understand that not everything is preventable. Last year in the garden club, one of our members was ambushed by a group of squirrels mid-winter. They got into her garden and they ate every Brussels sprout plant she had down to the ground. And she was devastated. That is gardening. No matter how prepared you are, you can never prevent everything. And this gardener in particular is always so prepared. She follows instructions so well, and her garden is beautiful. She is a wonderful gardener. But those squirrels were just meandering through her neighborhood and found her Brussels sprouts while she was at work. There's absolutely nothing you can do about that. Not everything is preventable. A random frost that comes in and the temperature drops lower than the weatherman expected it to be can't be predicted. Sometimes these things just happen, and even the most prepared gardeners will suffer hardship and loss at one time or another. Whether it's pest, whether it's disease, whether it's weather related, or something that's just completely out of your control, you will experience loss as a gardener. That's part of your journey. That's how you learn. So understanding that first and foremost, not everything is an emergency, and second, not everything is preventable, really just takes the pressure off and allows you to do what you can do. Your plants are going to do their job, and you're going to do yours, and you're going to leave the rest up to God, because remember, we sow the seeds and He provides the increase. That is for everything in our life, and gardening is no exception. There's only so much that we can do, so don't beat yourself up. Just prepare. Just protect your garden in the best way that you can. You probably already know, if you've been around here any time at all, you probably already know what I'm going to say. I kind of feel like a broken record at this point, but it's worth repeating. I have to tell you this. Pest prevention starts with your soil. Everything starts with your soil. Just like your body can only do what it can do as best as it is prepared for it, your garden's the same way. Someone who is not taking care of themselves and who does not exercise or eat well is not going to have the capability to fight off infection as someone who is in better shape. That is just the facts. Your garden is the exact same way. Healthy soil equals healthy plants, and healthy plants equal fewer pests. That's just the way that it goes. And here's why. Your soil is full of microbes, bacteria, fungi. It's full of nutrients like nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. And your soil is busy with a life underground that you can't even see. If you've got a soil like this, your soil is much less likely to suffer devastation. That's because your plants are able to bounce back. Your plants are going to be bigger if your soil is full of nutrients. That means that your devastation is going to be less. A plant that is tiny, that has a slug approach it, can be eaten to nothing in no time. But a large, robust, strong plant can't be eaten down by a slug overnight. This puts you ahead of the game. If you want to know how to keep bad bugs out of your garden, how to attract good bugs to your garden, how to control pests like slugs and cabbage worms, how to not use insecticides, the answer is always going to be to start with your soil. Your soil health is going to allow you to prevent so many problems before they ever happen. A nutrient-rich soil allows you to intensively plant. And when you intensively plant, you're putting plants together that naturally protect each other. In my garden, one of my biggest pests is my chickens. I have a chicken garden that I grow, and it's almost an experimental garden. And I use all kinds of companion plantings to keep the chickens away. Did you know that chickens, like deer, rabbits, and raccoons, do not like fuzzy plants? This is a perfect example. If you plant herbs like oregano around the borders of your vegetables, they're not going to mess with them. Deer, raccoons, chickens, rabbits do not like fuzzy leaves. You plant oregano and you're going to prevent these pests right off the bat. And boy, isn't that easy, because now you get oregano. In the same exact way, if you look on the label of most organic insecticides, what you're going to find is that the number one ingredient almost every time is garlic. Garlic is a natural pest deterrent. Do you know why? It's because it has such a strong odor that the pests cannot smell the host plant that they're looking for. A cabbage worm is looking for cabbage and members of the brassica family. If you plant garlic or onions, alliums in with your brassicas, they are going to give off an odor that's going to repel these pests. because the pests are not going to be able to smell the host plant. It is amazing. And when we think about our gardens in the way of nature, and when we think about our gardens the way that God originally intended things to be, and we mimic that plan and everything works together, you will be so much more successful. Intensive planting also creates a more diverse garden, the way that God intended it to be. This makes it difficult for pests to travel from one plant to the next, as opposed to gardens in rows. Gardens in rows are not natural. They serve a purpose for sure. But if you don't have the space for rows, you don't have to say to yourself, I can't garden. In fact, you will probably have a more successful garden using less chemical insecticides and herbicides because your garden can be diverse. A raised bed garden is so diverse in the sense that you may grow cabbage right alongside mustard greens, garlic, Swiss chard, spinach, and different flowers and herbs. This is going to make it extremely difficult for these pests to move from plant to plant. Remember, I told you that these pests are specific to certain plants. In a row, they can go from cauliflower to cauliflower. But in this intensively planted, diverse garden space, it's very difficult for them to move from host plant to host plant. That's going to make your pest problem so much better. This is another reason. These pests, as they try to move from host plant to host plant, are going to encounter other insects. And a lot of times these other insects are predatory. So as they are trying to make their way from one cauliflower to another, a predatory insect may swoop in and get them right off the soil. This makes things so much easier. They do the work for you. In the garden club, we have so many times we will post in the Facebook group and be like, I see the worm poop, but I cannot find the worm. More than likely, something has come in and done the hard work for you. This makes your gardening efforts so much more successful. And this is only possible, guys, when your soil is healthy. Your soil is also going to produce plants, like I told you, that are more disease and pest resistant. That's because they have healthy leaves, healthy stems, and healthy roots. They're going to be larger and they're going to be more robust. They're not going to be as susceptible. This is super important because pests are just like everybody else. They go for the easy stuff. If you've got a plant that's laying down, fallen over, broken leaves, that is like the red carpet for slugs and snails and worms. A healthy, robust plant is not going to be as susceptible to these pests and disease damage, actually. And because they don't want to work as hard. They can always find something they don't have to work that hard for. In case you haven't been convinced yet, let me tell you, your soil is the number one contributor to most cool season pest problems. So let's take this from soil positive to soil negative. If you've been around for any length of time, you know that I am a huge advocate for soil health. It's where we focus our attention in the Wild Child Garden Club, in the Kitchen Garden Academy, and I offer a course called Wild Child Soil Building that'll take you step by step through how to build your soil before you actually plant. But I have a feeling that a lot of you are sitting here right now doing exactly what I've done so many times. You've already gone to the nursery, you've already planted all of your plants, and you did feed organically just for the good of it. But what you didn't do is build your soil first. And guys, you're shortchanging yourself. Your garden is capable of so much more. Now, as I told you before, I've got the blog post up that's going to give you very practical ways to address these cool season pests that you're going to see this season. There's no way around it. They're going to find you. But if you focus on your soil, your damage is going to be so much less. Also, don't forget to go check out that blog post at releaseyourinnerwildchild.com. What you're going to find there are some very, very practical ways to get these pests under control. Prevention is key. And I'm going to show you these very practical ways to prevent these pests from coming in and taking over your garden. This is all on my blog, releaseyourinnerwildchild.com. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope that you really take this to heart. I hope that you sit down and figure out what your pests are, what you need to be concerned about, and how you can prevent them. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you have a season that is full of vegetables and no pest at all. For more information about how you can release your inner wild child, you can visit us online at www.releaseyourinnerwildchild.com or follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Wild Child Farms.